Hello, I'm Eric Tapia with the Oklahoman. I'm here with Dr. John Barthel, the provost for the University of Central Oklahoma here today. Recently, he and a group of student scientists from the university and other universities across the nation went to the Greek island of Lesbos and Turkey to conduct experiments on bees. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Barthel.
You bet, my pleasure.
So kind of give me an overview of the trip and, I mean, what was the trip for?
Okay. All right, well, good, I'm happy to. The first thing that I should probably tell you is that, the entire program is funded by the National Science Foundation, and it's funded through a particular special program within the National Science Foundation called Research Experiences for Undergraduates, or REU. And that particular program funds these activities for students across many different disciplines. I happen to be in the biology area, but they also have it for engineering and many other areas. And the University of Central Oklahoma is the primary institution, what we call the principal investigator institution. But it's a large collaboration, actually. We have a number of colleagues, including at Oklahoma State, University of Kansas, University of Puerto Rico at Rio Piedras, Bloomsburg University, and University of Tulsa as well. So it's a big group. And we've also worked with 4 institutions in Greece and Turkey as well, currently on the project. So there's a lot going on there. The basic idea of the REU program is to provide a meaningful experience for students in conducting research. And what that means is that we try to give them every aspect of the scientific process. So we begin with formulating hypotheses, then we conduct experiments, we take that data, we analyze it, the students get an opportunity to present that at a national meeting, and then also we try to have that published as well. So they get to see every phase of the scientific process. We're interested, biologically speaking, in honeybees, as you know. And honeybees right now, as you probably know as well, are running into some tough times, okay, due to colony collapse disorder and other issues. And one of the things that you can do to help to get insights with an organism like the honeybee that's invasive is to go back to the place where the honeybees originated from. Most people don't realize this, but honeybees are actually not native to the United States or North America. Okay, they come here from Eurasia. Okay, so Asia, Africa, and Europe. And so that's the premise of the grant, is to go back and to study these species in the areas where they came from to gain insights about their biology. And we do that in a lot of different ways. We look at their foraging behavior. We also look at stressors in the environment, including things like pesticides that have become a big topic recently. And the students get an opportunity to work a lot of different aspects of the bee and the problems that surround the bee ecologically.
So on your trip, were gone for 10 days. How many years have you been doing this?
A decade.
A decade, oh wow. So what were some of the experiments that you did this year in regards to looking at bees? And I know some of them were through pollination, but kind of explain that.
Yeah. So one of the things, referencing back to my earlier statement that we're interested in is how does the honeybee, sort of behave as a forager in Turkey and Greece versus the way it does in the United States. And when we first began doing these studies, we were a little bit surprised to see that a lot of the things that we thought honeybees liked in terms of different species of flowers and plants in plant communities, that all changed when we ended up in Turkey and Greece. They had a whole different suite of interests that they liked. That changed our, sort of perception of honeybees and how to think about them foraging these environments. And so in Greece, we've looked specifically at a type of a bush called a chasteberry, which is actually grown around here as a horticultural variety known as the Texas lilac. And so we've studied their affection for the Texas lilac and have been very surprised and learned a lot about honeybees and their need for really kind of high rewards in terms of high volume of nectar that they find in plants like that. And you can see the same thing kind of going on here. If you have a Texas lilac, go out to your yard sometime and take a look at it and you'll see that.
Well, I got to plant one now.
Okay.
So most people don't know what colony collapse disorder is and the pollinating problems that the honeybees and other bees are having. Because, I mean, there's more types than just honeybees, bumblebees, carpenter bees, and all that. I mean, can you kind of explain the two things?
Colony collapse disorder in particular. Yeah, so colony collapse disorder is a complex subject, and what happened is about 15 years ago or so, beekeepers in the United States began to notice a real decline in their colony numbers in their hives. Beekeepers often keep their hives in areas over winter, and then in the spring what they'll notice when they're about to take them out for pollination is that there's really high mortality that they had not anticipated before. And that began a whole series of questions that people have now had during the last decade or so to try to understand what underlies that. From my perspective, it's a number of different factors. It probably has to do with disease agents, pathogens, has to do with parasites, but there's also increasing evidence that this may have to do with certain kinds of pesticides, a particular category of pesticides called neonicotinoids. And if true, this kind of cocktail, if you will, of different factors has created a perfect storm which has really caused a major decline in honeybees in the United States and perhaps in other parts of the world.
So, I mean, individuals in the state of Oklahoma, I mean, why should they be interested in the bees of all types? I mean, what would spur their interest to look into this?
Well, I think the first thing to consider is that honeybees are probably more important to the United States than any other country in the world in terms of the work they do as pollinators. Many of our crops that we rely upon for food come from those places where the honeybees came from, and we rely upon the honeybees to pollinate those crops. You know, in California, for example, somebody was just telling me the other day that they noticed that the price of their almonds were going up, and most of those are produced in California. It's probably $1 billion+ a year industry, and that crop is directly dependent upon honeybees for pollination. And because it's become harder to get the hives that you need to move into the orchards each year to pollinate those crops because of colony collapse disorder, prices have gone up because it costs more to rent the bees, and so the growers have to pass that charge on to other people. So that's one thing. If you care about your pocketbook, it's pretty important. But I think the other thing, of course, is just the value of bees as pollinators generally of all the flowering plants that we almost take for granted, including those that are in our yard and make our environment more beautiful.
So kind of going back to what the students experienced, I mean, what do you think they got out of the trip? And, I mean, how do you think that will affect their futures?
Yeah. So I think the first part I just reference back to what I said earlier about the fact that they get to experience science as a process. And even though the program is relatively short, we make every effort to ensure that they're involved in every segment of the scientific process. So they come out of that, I think, having an understanding of what's involved in doing science. And because of the nature of this particular program, it's pretty fast-paced. They're doing a lot of traveling. They're doing a lot of thinking, you know, on the fly. They get a real sense of every aspect of doing science. So I think that's part of it. You know, I think another part of it is they learn how to do team. They learn how to work together. And also important in this particular program is they get an international experience. So now they know how to do team. They also know that there's a connection between biological problems that we have in our environment in the United States and to Turkey and to Greece and to other parts of the world. So having that mindset at an early point in their careers really benefits them because they don't have to learn that later. They're basically prepared for a good career in science, and we want to encourage them to go on in science. This is one of the objectives of the National Science Foundation, is to increase the number of students that are in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, or STEM. And so by giving them this experience, whether it's in biology or other disciplines, this really gives them a head start on a career in science. Yeah.
So kind of wrapping up our interview, what's the one thing that you got out of the trip this year, or the decade you've been doing it?
It's the importance of the future. You know, I mean, when you work with students the way we do, at some point you begin dissolve away from the equation, and the students become central to the whole idea. And these are the people who are going to replace me and many other people in the workforce, in the universities, in industry one day to support this entire society. And so I think the thing I would take away from this is the value of education and the value of doing the best job that you can, training and educating students at an early point in their careers.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you, Dr. Barthel, for joining me today.
You bet.
Thank you muchly, guys, and have a great day.